This is a review of The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey Chronicles, Art and Design. And this will be the first in what I'm guessing will be a long series as I review all of the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit related art and making of books, or at least the most important ones anyway. And I really wanted to start with this Hobbit Chronicles series because I think they are the best art books I have ever read. And I kind of suspected these books were going to be quite special as soon as I picked them up because, I mean, first of all, I love that there's no actual imagery on here. I always like that in books for sort of fantasy books like this because it makes it look a little bit more authentic, and it's very brave because you would expect to see something like, you know, of Gandalf or Bilbo or the dwarves to help sort of like market the book and attract people's eyes. But I like this much better, and it's all sort of like textured and it feels great. And then as soon as you open up the book, each of the Hobbit Chronicle books has some sort of like paper poster or some sort of extra at the back of the book. This one actually has two. And what I really liked about this is Thorin's map. But just immediately seeing that they've put art here and then here, and it doesn't really have anything, like this is just, they're just using the back of the map for those pieces of art. And that to me was a real signifier of something really special, that they are using every available surface in this book to cram as much art and design work as possible, because I feel like with sort of anyone else they would have just like left this blank. And so then the map itself is really nice and big, fantastic reproduction. But then what I really like is you can probably not even really faintly see here the runes. You'll remember from either the book or the movie that there are runes that appear here in moonlight. And so what they've done that's really cool with this book is this is actually in glow-in-the-dark ink, so you can sort of see the runes light up. And it was just these sort of immediate attentions to detail that just really signified to me that this was going to be a series of books that really cared about producing an amazing series of art and making of books, and they more than live up to this great first impression. So it's been really great because in the last 15 years, pretty much every major movie receives some sort of behind-the-scenes book. Typically it's an art book, and then sometimes it might be an art and making of book, or just a making of book. And in some rare and wonderful instances, a movie will receive an art book and a making of book. But the number of books they released for The Hobbit is absolutely unprecedented as far as I'm aware. It's really crazy. So the way it breaks down is that for the 3 Hobbit movies, they each receive 2 books known as The Hobbit Chronicles. One of those is sort of an art and design book, like a traditional art book, and the other is kind of a bit more of a making of book. And then each of the 3 movies also gets a movie guide, which is also another making of book. And then Smaug even got his own small art and making of book. And so for these 3 movies released over the course of 3 years, there were a total of 10 behind the scenes books released. And I've just never encountered anything like that before. I mean, something like Star Wars obviously has more total books, but those have been released over the course of, 30 years. And so the skeptic in me was immediately thinking, oh, this is just overkill. They're dragging out the content over many books to try and make more money. But that could not be further from the truth. Each of these Hobbit Chronicle books is just so full of stuff. I even get the impression that they probably could have done a whole bunch more. Like, for example, this first Hobbit Chronicle book that we're going through now has over 1,000 pieces of art in here, which again I think is probably more than any other art book I've ever encountered. And that might make you a bit worried that the images may be a bit too small, but for this one I didn't find that to be an issue. Some of the other ones I did, but we'll talk about those when we get to that. But and it's also just some of the most beautiful fantasy film concept art you'll see. But that's no surprise when you consider the fact that Alan Lee and John Howe were the lead concept designers on these movies. Likewise, the quantity and quality of text in the book is also really fantastic. The author of these Hobbit Chronicles is listed as Daniel Falconer, who is actually one of the artists at Weta who worked on the movies, it's always really cool to have someone who is actually involved in the process doing these behind-the-scenes books. But he doesn't actually do a whole lot of writing himself in these books per se. I think it's just more of a matter of him being the sort of director of these books in a way, because essentially all of the text in this book is commentary from the artists, designers, production heads, such a wide range of the cast and crew who worked on these movies. And that, in my mind, is the best way to do an art and or making of book. And that's nothing new. We've seen tons of art books over the years that use quotes and commentary from the designers, cast, crew, etc. But more often than not, I always feel that they are kind of unsatisfying. Usually there's not enough, and the quality of the commentary they're making is usually pretty lackluster, kind of obvious, never particularly interesting. But that is not the case with these books. It's some of the most insightful stuff you'll read about the craft that goes into movie making. So the Lord of the Rings trilogy are my favorite movies of all time, but I wouldn't say that extends to The Hobbit. I mean, I like The Hobbit okay, but when I watched it, I had a lot of the same criticisms as a lot of other people, but I enjoyed it as much as it's an extension of The Lord of the Rings. But despite that, I just think that collectively these are some of the best art and making of books. And when combined with the appendices in the extended editions of the movies, that has actually been where my primary enjoyment from these films has come from. Like when I first watched these movies, I was like, yeah, they're okay. But now, having watched all the behind-the-scenes documentaries and read all these books, then when I went back and watched the films, it was a completely different experience, and I just enjoyed it so much more and had such a deeper appreciation. And that's why these are the sort of books that, even if you're not necessarily the biggest fan of The Hobbit, but maybe you do like Lord of the Rings, or you like filmmaking in general, or just sort of like fantasy art in general, I would still recommend giving these books some pretty serious consideration, because the quality and quantity of the behind-the-scenes material that they have put together for the behind-the-scenes documentaries in the appendices for the extended edition and these Hobbit Chronicles, as well as the Hobbit movie guides, has resulted in what I would consider to be the most fulfilling and rewarding art and making of experience I've ever encountered.